Hey, how are you? Kevin Clear here with The View from the Pew. And today I want to talk about something that is kind of a hands-off area in our culture. And it's one that is a little troubling to me because as a preacher, I hear people read books and bring up subjects. And although they may come down somewhere, there's this underlying supposition that says, even if I hold the position, I'm not going to suggest that that's the right position. I'm not going to suggest that there's such a thing as good and bad, as better and worse. And so what has happened is that we have taken the idea that it's wrong to discriminate and applied that across the board. And here's what I mean. Let me explain just a little bit. It's legitimate to say we should not discriminate based on race or gender or color or, ethnicity or social status, wealth or lack thereof. These are things that have traditionally been places where we discriminate and consider some people superior and other people inferior. And that's wrong. There's no question that that's wrong. And in fact, what God calls us to do is to love and respect every soul the way He does. However, the truth that it's wrong to discriminate against people does not translate into the idea that it's wrong to discriminate against ideas, against practices, against beliefs. Because the reality is that some beliefs are better than others. Some beliefs are really bad and harmful and dangerous. Some beliefs are good and helpful. Some activities, same thing, are bad and harmful and dangerous to us as individuals and to society as a whole, while other behaviors are healthy and good and beneficial. And yet we live in a time and place where it's considered inappropriate to say so. And so in this video, I want to give you a couple of examples of ideas and activities that are better and worse. I want to tell you at least one example, two examples from Scripture where the ability to know the difference between right and wrong and to side with the right is actually practiced and encouraged. And then I want to ask you to change your mind. Don't buy what the culture tells you, that all things are subjective, that we can't know right from wrong in any given situation. There are a few areas of life, maybe where you live or what you eat or what you wear, that are pretty subjective. Do what you want because it's what you enjoy. But that doesn't extend to moral activities, religious truths, even some political ideas are better than others, right? And most of us buy into that. We just don't admit it. Communism or democracy. Most of us would say one of those is better than the other, right? And so I want to start by giving you some examples. First, let's consider a course of action. If I need or want some thing, maybe it's a loaf of bread or maybe it's an Xbox, I can do one of two things. I can work hard to earn the resources I need to secure that stuff. I could deceive someone and take something that is not rightfully mine, or I could use force and take what I want from somebody else who's weaker than me. And guess what? Only one of those actions is right. And so in a very real sense, some courses of action are superior, are better than others. What about moral positions? One perfect example would be pertaining to sexuality. One position would say that sexuality is a good thing to be engaged in, but only within a committed marriage relationship. Another position would be that sexuality is just something our body does and we should enjoy it however we can and want to. The reality is that one of those positions, the position that says sexuality is something to be engaged in between a married couple, one man and one woman, who are committed to each other for life, is superior to every other option. And in fact, the number of single parents and the crime rate and the education level and any number of other measurable statistics pertaining to what happens when we don't have a nuclear family in place demonstrate that that's a superior moral position to hold. And so you may not agree with me, and guess what? You are free and have every right to disagree. And I would stand up and fight to ensure that you keep that right. However, I wouldn't hesitate to tell you, and I'm not going to hesitate to tell you right now, that if you think human sexuality is just something to be engaged in with whomever, whenever you feel like you want to, you're holding an inferior moral position, a position that is damaging to you and society as a whole. Another consideration, a moral position, is one pertaining to the value of life. One position says all life is valuable and ought to be cared for and respected. Another position says not all life is valuable. Some life, if it's deficient in some way, maybe a non-functioning brain or some physical ailment or some dependency on another human being, whether that be a medical piece of technology or whether it be still attached to a woman who's pregnant, those kind of lives are less valuable and we can end them whenever we want to. Well, guess what? The position that says all life should be valued and respected is superior to the one that says, nah, certain lives that meet certain conditions forget about it. We don't care about those lives. Even religion, and I know I'm really, traipsing into territory that I'm not supposed to get into. But cultural elements of culture can be better or worse. I'm talking about a particular element of our culture which says we should be totally indiscriminate and totally subjective about everything. Well, that's a bad element of our culture. There are other bad elements of cultures, the cultures that degrade and even mutilate women. I don't care if that's part of their culture. It's bad. And that's a bad piece of culture. A culture that says certain people ought to be elevated above others and formulates a caste system. By the way, we're crossing over because that's also a religious ideology. That's a bad religious ideology. It's a bad cultural ideology. Another religious ideology that's bad would be the one that says you should conquer by force anyone who doesn't share your religious convictions and either force them to adopt those convictions or kill them if they don't. That's a bad religion. It's inferior to a religion that says all human beings are worthy of love and respect. And all human beings should be granted the freedom, the right to decide what they believe, even if they want to decide to believe dumb stuff. Even if they want to decide to engage in bad, dangerous practices. You need to love them enough to say, that's not a good idea, but you can't force them to not do it. You can't use violence to propagate your religion. And so the reality of the situation is that sometimes there is such a thing as right and wrong. That some ideas, some moral values, some political pursuits, some activities are better than others, even superior to others. I'm going to give you an example from Matthew chapter 19. Here, there's been this ongoing debate between two religious factions within Judaism, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they're fighting over divorce and what constitutes a reasonable cause for divorce. The Sadducees say Any indecency that's found in your mate, you can get rid of her. The Pharisees say, whoa, 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 only marital unfaithfulness is grounds for divorce. And in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9, Jesus says this, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Jesus acknowledges that one party was right and the other party was wrong. In fact, in the book of Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews, in chapter 5, verses 11 through 14, says that Christians who are mature have developed the ability to determine right and wrong. In fact, we're encouraged to do that more than once. A well-known passage is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 21, where we're to test all things and hold fast to that which is good. Another great example is 1 John chapter 4, where we're not to believe everything, but we're to test things and figure out whether it's right or wrong, because there's a lot of false prophets, a lot of liars sharing bad information. And so you need to check the facts. And so, as unpopular as this notion is, the reality of the world in which we live is that some things are better than others. Some ideas are bad ideas and some ideas are good ideas. Some practices are bad practices and some practices are good practices. Some religious ideas and some religions are good and others are bad. And although we don't like to think about that or talk about that, that's reality. And so we need to develop the courage, as one of my college teachers say, the intestinal fortitude, to call a spade, to expose bad and harmful ideas as bad and harmful. Some people may not like it, especially the ones that are engaging in the things we're saying are bad and harmful. But the alternative is to let people purposely, knowingly, let people hurt themselves and others. And I'm going to suggest that's even worse than causing them a little bit of discomfort or shame by exposing that something they're doing is wrong and bad. And so what I want to leave you with as you're watching this video is an admonition. You do what Paul said do in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 21. Test all things. Don't just believe whatever you're told. Don't just buy whatever anyone is selling. When you read a book or a newspaper article or watch a TV show or watch a video on YouTube, examine what's being said. Write it down. Consider the arguments. Follow it through and decide if this is good or bad, if it's valuable or if it's nonsense. And then live and act according to what is good and what is right and what is beneficial for you individually, but also for society. By the way, selfishness is bad for society. And so, what I'm asking you to do is be discriminating. Not to discriminate, but to be discriminating. That's the view from the pew.